So today, yes, it's Nachamu. Today we read on the Torah the Shema Israel. In the Shema Israel we read Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohech, and you shall love your God with all your mind, with all your heart, with everything that you are. And then also today is Tu B'Av, 10th of Av, and people are talking all the time now. You see in social media, people didn't know so much about this holiday, but now it's become it's one of the most ancient traditions and most ancient holidays. But people compare this as the Valentine's Day of Jewish tradition, as the day where it's described in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, that the single girls will dress, with the same type of clothing. So there is no comparison, and they will lend each other, clothing, and then there is no comparison on, which one is wearing a Pierre Cardin or Gucci, or, everyone is kind of the same. They're going to the field and find their soulmates. So some people call also the soulmates. So it's about love. It's about love, and it's more expanding than that. So we talk about love here, love there. We start, Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. We have it all the time. But especially the Shema is here in this parasha. And I just wanted to ask you, and we were going to study together, but I want you to ask you, what is love for you? From there you can answer on the Facebook, but here we have some people, what is love? Just tell me one word for it. Trust. Hello? Yeah? What? Devotion. Caring. Making a priority for somebody else. What? Being selfless. Connection. Desire. Love it. Okay. So good. You're not, far from a lot of people when I ask this question, and so yes, people, respond, and the answers go into and mindful and opening hearts, and conditional giving, spiritual alignment, radical empathy, yearning, accepting vulnerability, seeing the others, and getting space for the holy presence. And you say connection. A lot of people say connection. And when usually we talk about spirituality, people say connection too. So why is that when we say the word spirituality, we say connection, and when we say love, also talk about connection? So I'm going to talk and teach from this handout that you have, which is from classes that I have been taking with a foundation and organization called Ayeka, founded by Rabbi Ben David, former teacher for more than decades of Pardes Institute in Israel. And he was teaching a series of 9 different classes of Rav Kook. Now, who is Rav Kook? Anyone knows who Rav Kook was? Yes, he was the first chief rabbi of Israel. He was born in Latvia. He was born in 1865, and he died in Israel, or what was called then Palestine, 1935. That means actually he was the first chief rabbi who was, which represented the League of Nations mandated by the Great Britain and that used to administer Palestine. So he was not under the new state of Israel. He was prior to that. He was a mystic, and he did something very special. I mean, they had a lot of things. Some people think, he was controversial, but he's had something very unique that people can tell about Rav Kook. One, he was a Jewish mystic. He was a fervent Zionist, and he was the first chief of Israel or Palestine. One of the things you'll see pictures of Rav Kook, you'll see that he has always the shtreimel here, and even in pictures, you'll see it all the time with the shtreimel. Usually the shtreimel, which is that big fair hat that the Hasidim use, and usually they use it for Shabbat or Chagim. So you might wonder, how can we have pictures of Rav Kook, who is an ultra-Orthodox, human being with the shtreimel all the time? The reason is that he used to wear every single day that Shtraima. Why? Because had a whole shtick with the tefillin, and he wore tefillin the whole day long. All day long. Not just in the morning, he will wear the whole day long. He didn't want people to ask questions so much. He had the shtreimel so he could cover the tefillin. Why did he have this? Because he always wanted to send a message, and for himself, that there was something above his mind. Always reminded that there was something about his mind, and that's where his mystical connection will come. So even if there is a letter from Rabbi Kook that says, to his father when he was 17 years old, says, "Father, I went through this year the Talmud, the entire Talmud 7 times, and I still not getting it. I don't have the right connection. It is not all about intellect. It's not all about studying. I need to have some connection. Otherwise, I'm going to drive myself crazy." So if you go to Rav Kook's house, in Jerusalem, there's a room aside that he put aside for his mystical connection. So what did he used to do? He used to after midnight, and because that's the Rabbi-Cantor, that time, where the connections will happen after midnight. He sharpened pencils. We're talking about the 20s, right? I mean, 1910, 1920s. He used to sharpen pencils, and he will spread them all around, the floor. He would go there, enter into trance, and then he write until he fall asleep. His disciples will find this journey on his journey, and then it was not just until 15 years ago that those entries were really revealed. But have something in mind. Why I'm telling this, because before we start, you need to know who wrote this. Hello. Okay. So, he never wrote for the public. He didn't intend to publish this. He wrote only what he canalized from the connection that he had with God. He wrote about life, inner life, and his relationship with God. And as you know very well, Jews, as you go to different synagogues, Jews usually don't talk about the relationship with God, even if you don't go to synagogue. That's not the dialogue you usually have when you go for coffee. So if you take source 1, we're going to understand a little bit. So I want you to have in mind that moment, the midnight moment, the trance moment. That's where it comes from. So you're going to realize certain things as we go through. So first source, it says, Hole ahava ani, love sick am I. Right? And the second one says, I am full of love for God. So how many times you hear when you come to shul, you hear the rabbis, talking about, I am fall in love with God. It's not the typical thing, you hear, right? You hear more rational things. Again, he's in trance. He's not writing in a rational way. He is in trance and he is in love. So when you are in love, you write prose, you write poetically. You like King Solomon, writes in Song of the Songs, Shira Shirim. It is full of imagery and poetry. Remember, he's canalizing. Let's go. So that's who Rav Kook is. He is lovesick, and he is full in love with God, for God. So now let's go into source number 3, which says, the supreme holiness is one of those language that Rabbi Kook liked to call God, right? Is full of love, kindness, compassion, from its exquisite unity. Hatred, judgment, and strictness result from forgetting God, crushing the light of holiness. So let's start to unpack a little bit that. So for Rav Kook, God is full of love. Some people may think, actually, when you read this, that we might all be talking about a different religion, right? But it's not true. Judaism has the language of love at its core. So what's the relationship between unity and love? So for Rav Kook, he writes, the knowledge of God starts with God's unity. Unity is equivalent to love for Rav Kook. If you take even the gematria of the word echad, right, that we have in Israel, the word echad is 13. The word ahava, love, also the gematria, the numerology sum is also 13. And when you have 13, you even get 26, which is the Yud-Keh-Vav-Keh, one of the names of God. So love for Rav Kook is the experience of a spiritual oneness. If God is one, let's put the math. It's an equation. If God is one, the world is a reflection of God's oneness. And if the world is a reflection of oneness, and I am in love with God, then I am in love with the entire world. That's the math. Again, don't get lost. Give me a sign of life. Yeah, give me a sign of life. There you go. I'm sure you're not falling asleep. They can fall asleep. I don't see them. So it says very well. Let's go. If the world is a reflection of oneness, and I am in love with God, then I am in love with the entire world. And therefore, hatred, judgment, and strictness results from forgetting God, because it's the opposite of love, or it's not love at all. So in a way, you are in an eclipse with God. If you remember the episode of Moshe Rabbeinu, he's a perfect example. The most humble person on earth, described in the Torah, gave everything for his people. He will always protest for his people. But if you remember that Moshe hid in the rock, he got angry. His anger made him forget God and all his knowledge. When we say in the Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, God is no one. God is oneness for Rav Kook. So for some, it might be, you might imagine now Rav Kook, not just with the shtreimel, but you might think that actually long hair, Woodstock, a hippie person, talking about all this nonsense is love, 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 right? So that's what he was all about. He didn't really come up with this. He canalized this from God. So for Rav Kook, the world is everything. Whether it's animated, inanimate, the rocks, chairs, the tables. He could see the whole puzzle. He could see everything as a creation. And he was able to see even the differences in between people. And in spite of the differences, he could see we were all one. So in source number 4, whenever the desire to come closer to God steers in a person, the love for all humanity expands in his or her midst. So for Rav Kook, getting closer to God makes you become a loving human being. Getting closer to God makes you become a loving human being. So I ask you, and ask ourselves, who is, for you, the most religious person in our community, in our midst? Very good, Dora. Now you get listening. So for Rav Kook, the person who is the most loving one is not the one who observes, Shabbat and observes, kashrut and is that type of religious. For Rav Kook, the person who is the most loving one. As we approach oneness, we need to express more of this oneness in the world. So getting closer to God, exquisite oneness. You are created in the image of God, as you remember. Sometimes the description of the most religious person is the one who is more observant, who knows more, keeps the laws. But for Rav Kook, all those things are external. All external things. Coming closer to God literally means coming more love. And therefore, we all need to look ourselves. So I have a question now for you. From 1 to 10, give me from 1 to 10, where are you in the love meter? From 1 to 10, where are you in the love meter? Love in general. Love for creation. Let's say love for the creation, love for humanity. Show me number. I can see numbers. From 1 to 10, where is your love? Okay, I get a 5. 10. That's it? 4. Okay. It's cool. It's cool to have this exercise. Look. I know you say 10, but Rav Kook says that 10 is God. So 9. It's true, right? So when you get married, for example, right, and no one tells you. I mean, you might go into prenuptial, meetings with your rabbi, counselor, or wherever, psychologist. But nobody tells you that you must grow in your loving. Right? Saying, I love you. Answer, I love you back. Right? Or how much you can say, I love you a lot. Right? So that's not really a 10. You have to grow. Because for Rav Kook, we are all a project in progress. Right? We coming closer to God is a spiritual journey. Then this is the journey of love. So we are a work in progress. We all are. Now I have another question for you. 1 to 10, how in shape you are. How in shape are you? Give me numbers. Physical shape, yeah. Physical shape. How you think 1 to 10? I get a 2. Okay. I'm going to give myself a 5. Anyone else? Okay. But the cool thing that when we talk about physical shape, right, or physical levels, we know that in order to get better and to get more in shape, you need a coach, you need to change your habits, change the eating, sleep more, right? Take care of what you do, medicine, vitamins, etc. So the question is, when you get to the spiritual level, or the love level, why don't we have an aspiration? Right? So my question to you is, what's your aspiration? What's your aspiration in life? To be a better person? Maybe? What's your spiritual status? Be more loving? Love more? Grow in love? So Rav Kook asked why we don't pay so much attention to this aspect in our lives. So here's the homework for you. You don't have to do it right now, even if you have this. Ask the person you have closest in your life, right? It might be your spouse, your partner, your child. Ask this question and do the homework. You'll see. It's very interesting. Because we might think we are 8, 9, 10, 7, in the loving meter. But ask this question. What do you need from me to receive more love? So I urge you to have this question to the closest person you might, your child, your spouse, your partner. What do you need from me in order to receive more love? Remember, we are a work in progress. And remember the love for all humanity. That's what Rabbi Kook says. It's for all humanity. It's not the people that I love more. It's not just my family or the ones who really, take care of me or the ones that actually I find some grace or they really, I like them. For everyone, even those who harm me, even those of whom I have disagreement, those are oneness, of the oneness. There is no, and there are no exceptions for Rav Kook. Now, source number 5. Faith and love are always intertwined with each other. When the two of them shine in fullness in one's soul. When the light of one of them is full, the light of the other is aroused. A human being is not predisposed to any spiritual calling more than to faith and love. From faith and love emanate all the spiritual light in the world that sheds light on all of life in the cosmos. Some of this you might want to, look more closely, when you get home. So, emunah and ahava, faith and love. Love is a spiritual experience. Love is not just an emotion. For Rav Kook, it's much deeper than that. Emotions come and go. Emotions are out of our control, right? Maybe my wife says, I love you, and then my emotion might say, I want to answer today, right? So it's not an emotion. Love should be unconditional. So love is not just an emotion. Love should be unconditional. And for Rav Kook, love is a natural thing. It's something that flows, it's natural, comes from the heart. It's part of the being of the human being. It's part of the soul. For Rav Kook, the human being is a machine of loving. It's a machine of love. It's a love machine who desires to love everything. Now let's go to source number, turn the page. Let's go to the second one on the second page. He says the following, listen carefully. I love all. I cannot not love all people and all nations. I cannot not love. He cannot conceive not to love all people and all nations. From the very depth of my heart, I want the glory of all, the perfection of all. I have no need whatsoever to force this feeling of love. It flows straight from the depth of wisdom of the soul. It's very deep what he's saying. Easy to accomplish? No way. He probably was one in a kind, But we can learn from it. We can achieve something. We might have an aspiration to be like Rav Kook, maybe, who's able to love the whole humanity, who is able to love the one who even harmed him and hate him. But here is what he says. If I love all, if I love God, right? Remember, we say all the time, we recite it twice a day. What does it really mean to love God? And here is the answer from Rav Kook. So he says, I cannot just, not love everyone. I want everyone. I want everyone to be successful. His success is my success. We are all one. It's all oneness, right? So it's very, very important. Now, let's go into the next one. It says, it is utterly impossible not to love God. It is utterly impossible not to be full of love for all of creation, as the beauty of God's light shines. And everything is a revealing of God's kindness, which fills the earth. As the beauty of God's light shines in it. Let's go just to the next one, because we are mindful of the time. Now, this is a very important one, especially for many of us. Who can stop the light of divine love that pulsates in my heart? And then he says, all of the Torah, the ethics, the mitzvahs, the actions, the Talmudic learning come to remove the obstacles so that an all-encompassing love can expand and spread to every corner of life, everywhere. What does he really mean with that? He says that all the learning, all the have, the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Halacha, the laws, the ethics, the Musar, the mitzvahs, everything that we do, the Midah, the social action, those are vehicles for Rav Kook. Those are vehicles for us to be more loving. If that's the end, just to learn for the purpose of learning and knowing more, showing off that we know more, for Rav Kook, that becomes an obstacle. So those are the vehicles. Even the Torah is a vehicle to become a more loving person, to really be with oneness, to understand and recognize that we all are one in the whole world, and to love the whole humanity, regardless of who that person or that part of the creation is. For Rav Kook, he asked this question that says, how do you know, even if you disagree with someone, that you did it with love? So they call, the rabbis call this, when you know a machloket, a discussion or a controversy that we have between each other, is leshem shemaim, right? It's for the sake of heaven. Or lo leshem shemaim, that is not for the sake of heaven. And it's, for Rav Kook, it's easy. Love is not conditional. You can be in agreement or not in agreement. But for him, again, he repeats, there is no space and place for hatred, harm, and anger. And the Gaon of Vilna, he said, how do you know if a discussion is for Leshem Shamayim, that is for the sake of heaven? That when you, even after discussion, after the arguments, after the disagreements, you're still being friends. And with that, I want to wish you Shabbat Shalom.